Memoirs of a Royal Guard. Written by Ansel. Chapter 9. The Game Store. Iridescence? I asked into the dark room. I heard her roll over her bunk to look my way. Royal blue magic illuminated around her horn and cast enough light for us to see without being blinding.
"Easy there," she said quietly. "Are you starting a conversation?"
Softly, I snorted. I could start conversations. I just chose not to. Maybe I am.
"You must still be high on your victory. It was just a board game."
It is a game that requires strategy, planning, and tactics. It was a good exercise, I said, but then rolled over to face her. That isn't what I wanted to talk about, though. How come you volunteered to work the gala? You'd have fit perfectly in there. At least until the riot started. Iridescence laughed quietly.
"We were partners, and I was waiting for a particular stallion to ask me to go. He never did."
I frowned. Really? That seems like a mean thing to do.
"Oh, it wasn't intentional. I just think he isn't aware that I'm around,"
she explained. I laughed a little. Wow. You must be pretty thick-headed then. What kind of pony could be so blind to the fact that you're one of the prettiest unicorns in Canterlot? She laughed too, shaking her head and looking at me with amusement. Our eyes met and she answered.
"Well, it takes all kinds, you know. But thank you for saying I'm pretty."
One of the prettiest, I corrected, before rolling over onto my back again and tugging my sheets up. That stallion must be pretty unobservant. I can't imagine. Iridescence let the light tip of her horn go out, and I could hear her giggling.
"You might try."
What did that mean? The next morning we slept in for a little while. Even though our shifts were exactly opposite, Iridescence and I usually spent our days off together.
"I have an adventure planned for us today,"
she said. I silently prayed to Celestia that it wasn't another trip to the File and Philly alchemist supply. Iridescence left to take me there and have me pick out scents for her. It was slowly killing me. I always thought she smelled just fine as. Oh?
"Yes, you and I are gonna go on the train ride. I've heard of a new shop open in Ponyville. Rumor has it that they carry all sorts of games. I thought we could go over and find something new to play, and get the princess a gift,"
she explained. That sounded like a great idea. Board games weren't silly like hats. They kept your mind sharp. Okay. There are some letters I want to drop in the mail on the way out, though, I replied while she got dressed. She had been wearing dresses lately when we went out. Nothing fancy, but more than the everyday mane and coat. Today, the one she wore was blue like my mane. I wonder where she found things like that, or how she afforded them. By that point, she had filled her locker, footlocker, and my locker too. That was perfectly fine since I didn't own much in the way of clothing. Once she was ready, we headed out to the train station after a quick visit to the mailmare. Typically, we walked everywhere. A train ride sounded like fun, but it also served as a reminder that I rarely flew anymore. I needed to do something about that. Iridescence bought tickets and we were off. I sat across from her, looking out the window and enjoying the scenery. She just seemed to watch me for most of the trip.
"You really are just yourself, aren't you?"
she asked. That struck me as a strange question. What do you mean?
"You don't pretend to be any other pony than yourself. You're comfortable with being Silent Night. Is that you, or is that your father's doing?"
This conversation was getting me an honor. I stretched my wings out and replied, I like to think it's me. I realize ponies sometimes act differently depending on where or who they are with. My mom always told me that if some pony doesn't like me for me, then they aren't worth worrying about.
"You don't talk about your mother much."
I shrugged. She and my father disagreed a lot when I was a foal. He just wanted to make sure I'd make it out okay as an adult. Iridescence nodded in thought.
"That must be nice. You wanted to be a royal guard, so that is who you are."
She looked out the window and I had a feeling that something else was going to be on. Subtext. Is something wrong, Iridescence? You seem sad. I caught her off guard. I guess she was accustomed to me missing subtext. She got up and sat down next to me.
Maybe a little.
She admitted. Why?
You never pry into my business.
I blinked a few times and quipped. You're sad because I don't pry. Iridescent smiled a little, which was a good sign, and softly pushed me.
No, you don't. I mean, you never pry in general. You give me all the privacy and space I want. Why now?
You look sad, I said plainly, but that wasn't enough. It bothers me to think that you might be sad. My wing slipped around her shoulder.
Aren't you sweet?
She whispered and leaned against me.
I miss my family, even though I became a royal guard to get out of town and put some space between us. Spending time with you reminds me how important friends are. I miss my parents and sisters, especially Dot.
She sighed.
Don't get me wrong, I really like hanging around with you. It doesn't mean I miss my family and old friends any less, though. When it was just the job, it's easy to forget what love feels like. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. My father had sent me away from Cloudsdale before secondary school. I was alone day in and day out, terrified, sad, and without comfort. It made me strong, but I wouldn't do that to my own colt. Yes.
Manhattan just feels so far away lately.
Perhaps you should take some vacation and go home for a little while, I suggested. I'm sure Captain can assign somebody else temporarily. He said it himself that we all need time off.
What about you? Don't you want to go home?
Iridescence asked. Did I? Who wouldn't? It had not crossed my mind in a long time. However, and I wondered why. I tugged Iridescence a little closer with my wing. I am home. We'd leave it at that. I guess my look said enough, and she let it drop. We rode the rest of the way to Ponyville in silence. Ponyville was larger than I'd imagined. It wasn't a densely populated town like Canterlot, and, without it being stuck on a mountainside, there was a lot of space available to spread out. That meant there was a lot of breathing room, and that was nice. Iridescent spirits had improved dramatically, and we wandered around the town for some window shopping.
The captain's sister lives here, you know.
She commented idly.
In fact, all the elements of harmony live here. It seems somewhat unlikely that 6 strangers could do the entire royal guard, couldn't, doesn't it?
With a slight shrug, I replied, I can't pretend to understand magic. You amaze me with how you levitate game pieces. It makes me jealous until I remember I can fly. She laughed.
Just game pieces, huh? How about my sword? Certainly better than clumsy hooves or mouths.
Those are fighting words. I bumped her with my flank. While we were bantering, we drifted off course and found ourselves in front of the pinkiest cottage I have ever seen. The mailbox was heart-shaped, then there were windows in the weather vane.
We may need direction to the store.
Iridescence said as she turned up to the walk to the little cottage. I followed along behind her. She raised her hoof, but before she could knock, the door suddenly opened. A fluffy pink pony stood in the entry and gasped excitedly as she saw us.
Oh, hello there,
Iridescence said.
We were looking for the new game store in town.
Pfft, the pink pony said, her tongue poking out and flapping. She pointed vaguely in the direction and added,
I see,
Iridescence said, turning in that direction.
Around the town hall, then.
The pony nodded and replied, but again, this time it sounded different.
Thank you,
Iridescence said, and we turned to walk in that direction. The door shut behind us and I asked, You understood her?
Not a word. Now get your flank up there, Sky, and find the place.
No additional coaxing was needed. It was time to fly. I leaped into the air, spread my wings, and soared high. Ponyville looked a lot smaller from the vantage point, and it didn't take too long for me to spot what looked like the store we were looking for. It was near the main street, and out front it had 2 large peeples, those generic wooden pony figures that were used in a lot of games. I circled longer than necessary since it felt wonderful to have the wind in my mane again. Keeping Iridescence waiting seemed rude, however, so I turned in and spiraled down to her. Landing at her side, I reported, It's on the other side of town.
Great. We should probably check it out before it gets too late.
She responded, and we were off.
You know, I enjoy watching you fly. You should do it more often to keep your wings strong.
You're right. We trotted along the wide streets of Ponyville, looking at the various stores. Sometimes I forget that I can fly. We just stand there all day. I added as we reached our destination. Iridescent smiled.
Well, don't. For now, however, it is time to find some new games and a gift for Princess Luna. Try to find something more thematic. You're too into strategy games.
What was wrong with strategy games? Perhaps the princess and Iridescence were tired of my winning streak. I shrugged and wandered into the store. If you're into board games, it was pretty impressive. Every wall was stocked with the latest and greatest games. There was even a section for small independent titles. I started there. After all, a royal guard should look out for the little pony. One game caught my attention with a brightly colored box. It had 4 colorful young dragons on the cover. They were cute. Super cute, actually. I looked over at Iridescence. She liked cute, and I didn't mind that sort of thing. A stallion can like cute things without being unstallion-y. I read the back of the box for more details. A light strategy card game where each player took the role of a baby dragon trying to build a treasure hoard. Light strategy. Light didn't count, right? I looked at Iridescence again and took the game over to her. Looked at the cute dragons, ignored the strategy part.
What did you find? Something off the independent table, huh?
I held up the game box for her to see.
Wow, that looks adorable. What is it about?
Baby dragon stealing treasure. There are 4 different kinds to choose from. Darkness, fire, moonlight, and sunlight. She looked at me and then at the box. Keep calm, no emotion. I stared back at her blankly, as if I were back at the academy.
Okay.
She finally said. Iridescence picked out a couple of games for herself and one for Princess Luna. Our gift. I used the word our loosely because she paid for it. It was a game about giant monsters fighting over Manhattan, which seemed kind of funny. With our purchases in my saddlebags, we headed back towards the train station. The train wasn't due for another 15 minutes or so, so we found ourselves standing there waiting. A faded poster on the wall caught my attention. It featured a yellow Pegasus with a pink mane all dolled up. She was holding a mug of cider. Clearly at some sort of advertisement.
Do you think she is pretty?
Iridescence asked in my ear, suddenly right beside me. She moved too quietly for a pony. They didn't teach that sort of thing in the academy either. Weighing my options, I replied, I think you're prettier, and somewhat tired of shameless advertising and product placement in everything we read, see, or watch. This doesn't make me want to buy cider.
Aren't you a smart cookie?
Iridescence said, turning back to the train tracks.
You're right, though. Everything's about advertisement. The next thing you know, it will start turning up in Princess Luna's fan fiction.
I snorted. Advertisements and fan fiction. What sort of monster would do that? There we go. Another adorable chapter of our very thick-headed stallion friend and the lovely Iridescence. And, wow, I'm honestly surprised how open he is with his emotions, frankly. You know, calling her cute and attractive and all that. What else is attractive is this wonderful today's sponsor, Raid Shadow I'm kidding. Today's wonderful Patreons. Thank you, Chase the Master, HKH4, aka Texture, The Animated Ghost, Solus, Mark the Wolf, my new Patreon Stu Hex, and of course a large thank you to Silent Titan. You guys are amazing and I appreciate your support so much. If you want other ways to support me, well, your viewership is more than enough. However, leaving a like and a comment down below does help with the algorithm, and I appreciate it a ton. Anyways, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.